You will never be free until you free yourself from the prison of your own false thoughts. Epictetus. It begins in silence, not the peaceful kind, the kind that lingers after laughter fades, after the phone goes still, after everyone else seems to have somewhere to be, someone to love, something to hold on to. It's the silence of an empty room and a full mind. You wake up, no buzzing phone, no good morning text, no one waiting, just you. And something about that feels off. Like you're falling behind, as if life moved on without you. This is where most men stumble. They open dating apps not out of desire, but out of panic. They fill weekends not out of joy, but out of fear. They chase validation just to escape the quiet, because somewhere along the way, we were told that solitude is failure. That if no one is choosing you, you're somehow less wanted, less worthy, less of a man. But the Stoics knew better. They knew that the man who learns to be alone without collapsing becomes unshakable. He doesn't seek noise to feel alive. He doesn't need an audience to feel valuable. He sits, he breathes, he feels the discomfort rise, and he lets it. Because beneath that discomfort is truth. And truth, no matter how heavy, is the birthplace of power. Most men run from themselves, but the rare ones, the dangerous ones, they stay. And in staying, something ancient awakens. Not arrogance, not bravado, but presence, quiet strength, a kind of self-possession that doesn't need to shout to be felt. So if you're in that silent space, don't rush to escape. Stay, breathe, let the world go quiet long enough to finally hear your own voice. Man conquers the world by conquering himself. Zeno of Citium. Solitude is not absence, it is exposure. A mirror without filters, a stage without applause. When a man walks through life without a partner, the world doesn't applaud. It whispers. It asks, what's wrong with him? They don't see it as space to grow. They see it as a sign of failure. But that's only because they've never tasted the clarity that comes when no one else is scripting your story. Long-term singleness isn't a curse. It's a forge. One that burns away performance, one that melts the mask. At first it's brutal. You miss touch, not the physical, the emotional. The confirmation that someone sees you, thinks of you, needs you. You catch yourself scrolling through old messages, lingering too long on memories. You wonder if you've made a mistake. But then, slowly, the fog clears. You start to see what you tolerated, the roles you played, the versions of yourself you bent into for the sake of comfort, affection, approval. You remember the compromises, not the healthy kind, but the kind that chipped away at your edges until you barely recognized your reflection. In solitude, there's no one to impress, no one to shapeshift for. And in that rawness, something real begins to grow. Discipline, direction, standards that no longer bend just to avoid being alone. You stop saying yes when you mean no. You stop texting just to fill silence. You stop dating to prove you can. Your mornings become rituals, not reactions. Your evenings hold space for reflection, not distraction. Your weekends become sacred because your time becomes sacred. And slowly the world starts to treat you the way you treat yourself. You are no longer a man waiting to be chosen. You are a man who has already chosen himself. That energy, steady, grounded, unfazed, is rare. And the world feels it before you say a word. The more we value things outside our control, the less control we have. Marcus Aurelius. There comes a point in solitude when the noise inside your head gets louder than the world outside. The doubts don't knock, they barge in. The what-ifs line up like ghosts. What if I never find someone? What if I'm wasting time? What if I'm just hiding? This is the test. Because when you're alone long enough, the truth doesn't ask for permission. It just shows up. You see your distractions for what they were. Not hobbies, but hiding places. You see your past relationships, not as love, but as negotiations to avoid yourself. You see how often you bent your own values to stay connected, to not be the one left behind. But now there's nowhere to hide. No flirty text to send. No date to dress for. No mask to wear. And that's where the shift begins. You begin to meet yourself. Not the version edited for approval, but the raw, unfiltered man beneath it all. The man with flaws, yes, but also with fire, with instincts, with direction. You start asking different questions. Not how do I get someone to choose me, But am I someone I would choose? Not how do I win her back, but why did I lose myself to keep her? And slowly your energy changes. You stop reaching, you stop over-explaining, you stop negotiating your worth in exchange for attention. You don't harden, you clarify, you don't isolate, you refine, you don't quit love. You stop begging for it, because you realize love that costs your identity is not love, it's dependency, and you've outgrown that. Now you walk differently, not with arrogance, but with awareness. You're no longer distracted by the chase, you're focused on the build. And from that build comes something most never find, sovereignty, not power over others, but peace with yourself. He who is brave is free, Seneca. Freedom isn't found in rebellion, it's found in restraint, in choosing not to follow every impulse, in no longer being ruled by urges disguised as needs. The longer you remain single, truly single, the more you begin to notice how much of the world is addicted to escape. Men jump from one woman to the next, not out of love, but out of fear. Fear of being alone, fear of being forgotten, fear of facing themselves. But when you're no longer afraid of silence, you become immune to manipulation. You're not swayed by charm. You're not lured by drama. You're not flattered by breadcrumbs of affection. Because you fed yourself something deeper, discipline, direction, and self-respect. You begin to filter everything through a new lens. Does this add to my peace or pull me from it? Does this deepen me or distract me? Does this feel like truth or performance? And in that filter, you cut ties, not with hate, but with clarity. You let go of flings that never feed your soul. You walk away from conversations that shrink you. You say no to invitations that echo emptiness. And people notice. They feel something different when you walk in. A man who doesn't need the room, but commands it. Not with volume, but with vibration. The vibration of someone who has faced himself and refused to flinch. You speak less, but what you say lands heavier. You move slower, but your presence lingers longer. You expect less, but what you accept is only what aligns. That's the real allure. Not the car you drive, not the watch you wear, not the charm you perform. It's the stillness behind your eyes, the quiet in your posture, the depth in your choices. Most men chase power to feel in control, but the man who doesn't need to chase, he already is. Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be. Be one. Marcus Aurelius. Eventually, solitude stops feeling like absence and starts feeling like alignment. You're no longer waiting for someone to arrive. You're not scanning the horizon for the next connection, the next distraction, the next validation hit. You're here, present, rooted, and in that presence, something rare begins to develop. Integrity. Not the performative kind, not the curated version you post online, but the kind built quietly, brick by brick, in how you move when no one's watching. You start keeping the promises you make to yourself. You start respecting your time like it's sacred. You start living in a way that makes your future self proud, even if no one else claps for it. And something incredible happens. Your standards rise, not because you're bitter, not because you're guarding scars, but because you finally realize your value isn't up for negotiation. You stop entertaining what drains you. You stop justifying what doesn't feel right. You stop shrinking to fit the expectations of people who never saw you clearly. Instead, you protect your peace like a king protects his crown. Your solitude becomes your temple, not your prison. From it, you draw discipline. From it, you draw discernment. From it, you draw a kind of magnetism that can't be faked or forced. And yes, people will feel the shift. Some will be drawn to it, curious, intrigued, maybe even intimidated. Others will fade away, confused, offended, unable to understand a man who no longer dances for their approval. Let them, because your life is no longer about fitting in. It's about standing firm. It's about becoming a man who needs no audience to validate his worth. A man whose very presence speaks louder than his words. And when you become that, the world bends differently around you, not because it owes you anything, but because it finally recognizes what you no longer beg it to see. First say to yourself what you would be, and then do what you have to do, Epictetus. There comes a moment when being single no longer feels like a season. It becomes a choice, a conviction, a declaration that you are no longer outsourcing your fulfillment to someone else. You stop chasing connection just to feel whole. You stop auditioning for roles in someone else's script. You stop mistaking chemistry for compatibility, attraction for alignment, attention for love. You see clearly now. Because the man who has spent years with himself doesn't just know what he wants, he knows what he won't accept. His peace costs too much. His clarity was earned in silence. He won't trade it for temporary warmth or half-hearted love. And so you begin to build differently, not for show, but for soul. Your routines are no longer about optimization, they are about devotion. Your work is no longer about status, it's about service. Your relationships are no longer about filling a void, they are about honoring your values. You realize that the longer you are single, the more sacred your space becomes. Not because no one deserves to be in it, but because not everyone is built to hold it. And you no longer fear that truth. You honor it. You no longer rush intimacy. You vet energy. You no longer perform to attract. You remain to observe. You no longer lower your standards. You raise your frequency, because now you walk in self-trust. You speak with self-certainty. You love with self-awareness. And that kind of man, grounded, whole, unshaken, doesn't fear solitude. He reveres it, because he knows that from this stillness, every great thing begins, not from noise, not from chasing, but from becoming. To be even-minded is the greatest virtue, Heraclitus. In the end, the man who remains single long enough is no longer just avoiding relationships. He's refining who he is in relation to the world. He's no longer the man who adapts to be loved. He's the man who aligns to be true. And this alignment begins to shape everything. The way he enters a room, steady, not seeking. The way he handles rejection, calm, not reactive. The way he chooses connections, slow, intentional, without hunger in his eyes. Because hunger makes men desperate, and desperation weakens boundaries. But the man who has spent seasons alone learns to feed himself from within. He doesn't overextend. He doesn't overexplain. He doesn't overstay where he's not honored. He walks away from flattery that feels empty. He pauses before diving into potential. He listens more to energy than to words. And what he builds from this place is not a life filled with people, but a life filled with presence. Presence in his morning routine, presence in the meals he eats, presence in the conversations he keeps, presence in the choices he makes, even when no one's watching. He no longer fears missing out because he understands a man who honors himself is never late for his own life. He doesn't move faster, he moves truer. And eventually, the right people, the right purpose, the right peace, they find him. Not because he chased them, but because he stopped chasing everything that wasn't him. The longer a man is single, the more dangerous he becomes. Not to others, but to every lie he used to believe about himself. He becomes a man who no longer needs to be chosen, because he is already claimed by his values, his vision, his truth. That is the quiet strength the world cannot ignore. That is the stoic flame the world tries but cannot extinguish.